Last week, we emphasized how our goal at the museum is not just to fill it with objects, but rather to fill it with stories for our guests, for anyone who visits the museum. The trio of racers from England known as the Peril Speed Equipe that we featured in our last episode certainly qualify as an exhibit that is brimming over with a tale of daredevil racing and personal intrigue. Now, when we commission a custom cycle, we're enabling each builder to weave a personal tapestry with his mind and his hands that will tell their own story. But sometimes the story that we want to tell is not inherent in a vintage cycle that we acquire with its own story, and sometimes it's not inherent in a custom cycle that we commission where the builder, the designer, has his own story behind the creation of that cycle. And therefore, sometimes the burden falls on our shoulders as curators to tell a story in the way that we bring together different cycles that have no prior connection to each other. When I was a photographer for National Geographic, I believed that the most important decision we made in publishing a book was the title that we chose for the book. The title you can think of as the key that you hand your reader before ever starting the book as to what the essence is of the piece of work that you're about to hand over to that reader. When we chose the title for my first aerial book with Nat Geo, we selected Through the Eyes of the Gods. And that title did begin to tell the story that we were indeed viewing Africa through the eyes of the gods, from above the earth, without any of the conflicts that exist at ground level. The title that we chose for the exhibit of 3 cycles that we brought together on which this episode is based is called Murderer's Row. When you choose a title like that, you put your viewer, your guest on alert that you're about to deliver something that just reeks, that oozes with menace and venom and murderous intent. First of all, a word or two about the title, Murderer's Row, that we chose for this exhibit. We didn't coin that label. It was the nickname given to the first 6 batters in the lineup of the 1927 New York Yankees, often considered the greatest team ever assembled. Its first 6 hitters, Combs, Koenig, Ruth, Gehrig, Musial, Lazzeri, were a fearsome cast of characters who ganged up on opposing pitchers with almost criminal intent. Instead of sporting leather jackets and tats like this gang, the gang of New York Yankees wore pinstripes. And the nickname Murderer's Row survives to this day as a synonym for any group that is not to be messed with. It stands for unrestrained power and muscle and menace. Each of the 3 cycles that we chose for this exhibit is a menacing creature all by itself. The cycles are rebels and fighters and heretics, and each one is outfitted mostly in black like members of a moto gang. First off, there's a 2012 Confederate R-131 fighter with a 2146cc power station. Production of this model was limited to only 10 hand-built copies at a price that was murderous on your pocketbook. Constructed primarily from aircraft-grade aluminum, this model sports carbon fiber wheels and a certain in-your-face styling characteristic of most Confederate models. Next, there's a 2016 Zero Engineering Type 9 shovel, designed in Japan and constructed in Las Vegas. Purchased brand new by the museum, this model is one of only 24 Type 9 shovels produced in 2016, powered by a 93 cubic inch S&S shovel head engine. Its feet have never touched pavement. And finally, there's a magnificent 2004 Acos Heretique with a 107 cubic inch carved from billet engine. But this is not just any Acos Heretique. This one is the fulfillment of the company's promise that the first in a limited edition of only 100 would be the last one sold. a promise of first produced, last sold. It proudly displays the designation Heretic 01 as its badge of honor. The odometer on this Heretic registers only 147 miles after 16 years. It's not just the profile of each of the members of Murderers Row that oozes a sense of power and menace. That aura is also given off by many of the individual features, many of the individual components of the cycles. Even motionless and at rest, the artfully constructed front wheels with perforated disc brakes somehow feel like a black panther that is ready to pounce on the highways beneath their paws. The reflective lenses of the headlamps have an abstract view of the road ahead that defies description in human terms. And other components just seem to be more alive and formidable than merely an air intake on a Mikuni carb, or a teardrop S&S cover, or a heavy-duty shock spring. But each cycle all by itself would not tell the full story. And it was the full story that we wanted to convey with this exhibit. If we think back to the 1927 Yankees, for an opposing pitcher to face one of those 6 hitters would be intimidating enough. But to face 6 in a row, when 4 of the 6 were destined for the Hall of Fame, would be to go eyeball to eyeball with Murderers Row. And to bring it closer to the moto world, seeing only one biker with tats and leather and bulging biceps is not nearly as menacing as when row after row of the members of a biker gang rumble by. And the same with our version of Murderers Row. We chose to display this exhibit in a way that would tell a story about a group with over 5,400 cc's of brute force flexing its muscle. We crowded the 3 cycles close together the way members of a gang ride, so that you had no choice but to take in all 3 at one glance. We tilted the front wheels at exactly the same angle, as if this threesome had just pulled into the Dragon Gallery and parked wherever it goddamn pleased. And we hung a sign above this trio to warn anyone who approached that you were on sacred turf occupied by Murderers Row. Like the bikes of a moto gang, you could look but not touch.